Thank you for watching this MEL Safety Institute employee training session. I'm your host, Patricia Stark. Today, we'll be focusing on workplace discrimination and harassment. We hope that you'll find this discussion informative and that it will help you and your coworkers to create a better working environment for everyone. The truth is that workplace discrimination and harassment are relevant topics for all of us, but perhaps even more for you. As a government employee or volunteer, you are a steward of the public trust with an extra responsibility to get this right. Though there's been progress in this area over the last few decades, things are far from perfect. Harassment still happens in many forms. A recent study found that 45% of respondents had witnessed harassment of a coworker. Obviously, the problem is still widespread. But how broadly? Well, that's what this conversation is about. This training is intended to educate anyone involved with police, fire, roads, utilities, housing, recreation, libraries, and citizen services within the local government. It is important to note that both volunteers and employees are included under the protection of the law. Because harassment and discrimination constitute a direct violation of civil rights, there is no immunity in a harassment lawsuit. Everyone must know their rights and responsibilities to protect themselves and those they work with on a daily basis. The New Jersey law against discrimination goes back to 1945 and was the first statute of its kind in the country. This law was enacted to protect people from workplace discrimination based on race, age, sex, disability, sexual orientation, marital status, and other factors. Under the law, it is illegal to discriminate in any employment action, including hiring, promotions, or terminations. The bottom line is we must treat all people the same. If you have any questions, talk to the person in your organization who is responsible for personnel and human resources. And believe it or not, it is also illegal to discriminate based on politics. The old adage, to the victors belong the spoils, no longer applies here. Public employees may not engage in political activity while on the job, and political affiliation may not be the basis for any employment action. This is very important, so I'm going to repeat this. No election politics in the workplace, and under no circumstances are you to use public property for anything involved in a campaign. As you have seen on the news and through social media, there has been a significant increase in awareness about the issue of sexual harassment. While attitudes have changed for the better, a recent study by the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights reports that 81% of women and 43% of men have experienced some form of sexual harassment inside or outside of the workplace during their lifetime. This includes verbal, physical, cyber harassment, or sexual assault. Another staggering statistic is that 68% of women reported being sexually harassed in a public space, and 31% at their residence. On the job, 45% of all harassment complaints every year are sex-based, and nearly 1/5 of the American adult workforce has been sexually harassed in the workplace. Sexual harassment flourishes where men dominate management and women have little power. In the public sector, the rate of sex-based complaints is lower because women have considerable presence in senior management. Unfortunately, a male-dominated culture still remains in some departments where women are underrepresented. Sexual harassment affects people regardless of race, religion, or gender. And because it is fueled by power imbalances, marginalized communities are uniquely vulnerable to sexual and other forms of harassment. According to a recent report of the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights, there are 3 types of sexual harassment. Criminal sexual harassment is the first type and involves coerced sex acts, physical confinement, or intentional physical touching of a sexual nature. This activity is a felony and could result in jail time for the convicted offender. Quid pro quo is the second type and involves trading favorable treatment for sexual favors. It is illegal for anyone to even suggest something of this nature. Quid pro quo is a Latin term that means something in return. Hostile environment is the third type of sexual harassment and involves making unwelcome sexual advances, offering offensive remarks, engaging in unwanted physical contact, or creating an intimidating hostile environment. This also includes sharing sexually inappropriate images, sending suggestive emails and notes, telling lewd jokes, or asking questions about someone's sexual history. Simply put, this form of harassment in any action or words will create an uncomfortable environment for fellow employees. In this context, the word uncomfortable means that any reasonable person would believe that the working environment is uncomfortable. Now, this can be interpreted broadly because different people have different thresholds, so the rule of thumb is no tolerance. Everyone needs to be particularly careful about anything that can be considered sexual stereotyping. For example, don't even say in jest something like, "all of you women are," because that will be interpreted as harassment. And as we'll discuss later, any type of stereotyping may get you in trouble. So when it comes to dating and workplace relationships, there is a rule of reason in place. Dating between coworkers may be still allowed, but there can be no harassment or intimidation of any kind. The relationship should be reported to management, and there is a no contact policy while on duty. It is also critical to understand that there can be no suggestion of any favoritism. Another common form of harassment is bullying, which includes cyberbullying. Bullying is not something relegated to playgrounds and school children. It is actually a serious issue among adults. But it's not just childish jokes and mean remarks. Bullying is an escalating process that targets victims in a series of systematic acts that are intended to intimidate. And just like sexual harassment, bullying is uninvited, undeserved, and unwarranted. It is often brushed aside as teasing or give and take. But claiming that a victim didn't seem to mind is not an excuse. Liability is serious here. What many people don't realize is that under the law, no one is immune when civil rights are violated. For a government employee, the lawsuit may be covered by insurance depending on the circumstances, but not all costs will be part of that coverage. You may be personally liable for any punitive damages, and that's just the financial cost. The damage to your reputation, your career, and your working relationships is incalculable. Well, now that we've talked about the different kinds of workplace discrimination and harassment and some of the consequences, the question remains, what can be done to prevent incidents from occurring? Of course, the best defense against harassment and discrimination charges is a combination of awareness, education, and prevention. Your employer has adopted a 5-part program to protect employees, volunteers, and the public. Part 1. The first step includes a clear policy prohibiting discrimination, harassment, and a violation of civil rights. Part 2. A procedure for complaints has been instituted so that victims can communicate with the relevant authorities. Part 3, supervisory and non-supervisory personnel are trained to deal with harassment and its related issues. Part 4, the effectiveness of the program is consistently monitored. And Part 5, management must be completely committed to enforcing these policies and communicating them clearly and often. Lastly, we need your help so that these policies are more than just words on paper. We all have a role in this anti-discrimination and anti-harassment program. For example, under no circumstances should you make jokes, use nicknames, or pick on anyone based on their race, religion, national origin, age, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. It might just be teasing or give and take for you, but you never know when a line is crossed and the jokes become offensive. Other people's boundaries are being violated, not yours. and it's not your place to decide how much is too much. Saying, "I thought they didn't mind," will not stand up as a defense, and it's certainly no excuse for your own behavior. This holds true for dealing with both within your organization and with the general public. In all of your interactions, try to be proactive in preventing harassment. If you notice someone else pushing too far or turning things in the wrong direction, step in and warn them before the situation gets out of hand. When things do go too far or you feel that you have been the victim of harassment, speak up. Racist, sexist, biased, or threatening remarks are never acceptable. You can talk to anyone in a management position about what you've experienced, not just your direct supervisor. The usual chain of command does not apply in these situations. Your rights are clearly laid out in the Personnel Handbook and on the Employee Bulletin Board. You will be protected from retaliation of any kind. Management has been trained how to address these situations. The policy is to take each accusation seriously and utilize the proper procedures to protect the rights of everyone concerned. The ultimate end game here is safety. We feel very strongly about the need for all of us to look out for the safety of our fellow employees and for the public. Emergency services, public works, and utility operations are inherently dangerous. It is sobering to realize that statistically, the typical local governmental worker has a higher chance of being injured on the job than a worker in construction or even an underground mine. Another critical fact is that there is a strong statistical relationship between workplace harassment and higher accident rates. Your employer has created a safety committee to provide the proper safety equipment as well as training. If you see something that appears to be a safety issue, speak up. If you see something, say something. If you expect other people to look out for your safety, well, you need to look out for theirs. This is just as true as when talking about issues that impact the safety of the public. One important piece of information that you need to know is that there is legal protection against retaliation for people who speak out to protect others. These are called whistleblower protections. A whistleblower can be anyone who, in good faith, files a complaint relating to discrimination, safety issues, or any form of harassment. This can mean disclosing or threatening to disclose anything that the informant reasonably believes to be illegal, either as an initial complaint or as part of an investigation into violations. Whistleblower protection also applies to anyone who objects to or refuses to participate in any activity that they reasonably believe to be illegal or incompatible with public health, safety, or welfare. To be considered a whistleblower, an individual must actually alert the proper authorities of the alleged wrongdoing. Now, this caveat is why it is so important to regularly and clearly communicate the complaint procedure to everyone concerned. More information on specific procedures is in your employee handbook. Now, granted, there are situations where false claims arise. In these situations, if the person filing the claim knew the complaint was false, then they are liable to penalties for intentionally and knowingly filing a false claim. This is an attempt to use harassment law to actually harass the accused, making it a civil rights violation with the accompanying punishments or penalties. The whistleblower laws were enacted to protect individuals making complaints, but these only apply if the complaint was filed in good faith. We hope this conversation has been helpful for you in understanding your rights and responsibilities when it comes to harassment and discrimination. Let me conclude by emphasizing that even if you personally are not the victim of discrimination or retaliation, but are aware of something that is improper, you can and must speak up, even if the actual victim has not yet filed a complaint. In fact, that goes for all harassment situations or civil rights violations. You cannot ignore what you see in good conscience going on around you. When you know your rights and the rights of your coworkers, you can safely work to end workplace harassment and improve the workplace for everyone. We hope this conversation has been helpful for you in understanding your rights and responsibilities when it comes to harassment and discrimination. Working together, we can all do our part to prevent incidents in the workplace and make local government a safer environment for all. Thanks so much for watching.